So let's talk about configuring SQL Server for client connectivity over TCP/IP. Now I'm going to start by opening up my SQL Configuration Manager. And so I'm going to find that here under Microsoft SQL Server and the SQL Server 2019 Configuration Manager. For some reason, my SQL agent has stopped. Let's go ahead and restart that. All right, so you see our SQL Server class is running. This is a named instance. So I want to come to my SQL client connectivity down here, and you're going to see protocols for class. And we're going to see TCP/IP, and the current status is enabled. So I'm going to right click and go to properties for TCP/IP. And you'll see we have enabled keep alive, listen all. Let's go to IP addresses, and I want to scroll down until we see this, IP all. Now, you'll see that we're using dynamic ports and we don't have a specified TCP port. What happens when you use named instances is the SQL server assumes you're going to have multiple instances on your physical server, or virtual server. But on your server, you're going to have multiple instances of SQL Server. So if you just do a default instance, it'll use port 443. But if you use named instances, it assumes you're going to have more than one, so it doesn't use the default port number. So it'll use a dynamic port number, and it will change that sometimes every time the server reboots or the service reboots or restarts. So we want to specify a specific port number. We're going to do that under IP all, and just for the fun of it, I'm going to go ahead and use 1433, which is our default for TCP. So I'm going to click apply, and it says any changes will be saved. However, they may not take effect until the stop service is restarted. So that's fine. Hit OK and OK. Now, before I restart this, I want to go to command prompt, and I want to run the command netstat -a, and I'm going to pipe that to more. Now, netstat is going to show me my active TCP UDP connections. -a shows me all of them, including listening ports. And what I'm looking for here in 0000, which is everything, is I'm looking for port 1443. And notice it's not there. We're not listening on port 1443. Okay, fine. So now let's go ahead and restart that service and see if 1443 shows up. So we're going to go to SQL Server class. I'm going to right click and restart. And so it'll stop the service and restart the service. And that'll take it just a second here. Okay, we're stopped. Now we're starting again. Okay, so now let's go back and rerun this command. So I'm just going to hit my up arrow. And now, right here, you can see we're listening on port 1433. Okay, perfect. That means we're listening. Now, can we connect to it? That's another question. So I've got my connection to my server up here over RDP. So I'm going to minimize that, and from my command prompt, I'm going to try to telnet to port 1443. Now, just so you know, the Telnet client is not installed on Windows 10 by default. You can find it if you just do a search for Telnet. It's going to take you to turn Windows features on and off. And you can scroll down until you find Telnet client and select it. So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to telnet to my server, which is 192.168.5.11, and I'm going to specify port 1433 and hit enter. And so it's trying to connect to 192.168.5.11 on port 1433. It's going to take a minute, and it's actually going to fail. And the reason it fails is because even though our server is listening on port 1433, we have Windows Firewall running, which is a default option on all of the servers. It runs by default. And there we go. Could not open connection to the host on port 1433. Connect failed. So that firewall is blocking connectivity for us. So I'm going to go back to my RDP session, and now we're going to configure that firewall. So I'm going to go to my server manager and find tools. And under tools, we're going to find Windows Defender Firewall with Advanced Security. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to create a new inbound rule. So I'm going to go inbound rules and a new rule. We're going to do this based on a particular port number. and click Next. We're going to use TCP port 1433. And we want to allow the connection. And click Next. And then what does this apply to? Domain, private, public. I'm going to go ahead and leave all of them checked. Now, if you're doing this on a production server, it's honestly not often going to be a problem because your server shouldn't be shifting from domain to public to private networks. That's typically an issue with laptops. So you can leave all of them selected or just select the active one, which in a corporate network is probably going to be the domain. So I'm going to click Next, and then I'm going to say this is SQL client connection for the class instance. And I'm going to click Finish. And this now shows up here at the top, SQL client connection for class. And if I double click on it, we can look at the protocols and ports and see that it is for TCP port 1433. Okay. That creates our firewall rule. I'm going to go ahead and leave Windows Firewall with Advanced Security up here because there's a couple of other things we're going to want to do there in a minute. But I'm going to go back to my client and I'm going to reissue this command. And so I'm just going to hit my up arrow and enter. And notice the difference. This connected us in immediately. Now at this point we're connected on 1433, and if we were sending, something that the SQL server recognized, that would be great, but we're not. So if we just hit, some random letters and hit enter a couple of times, it should break us out of it. It's not wanting to break me out of it at the moment. But that's okay. I know that I'm connected. And so that shows that I am now listening and my firewall has enabled it. Now, there are a couple of other rules that we're probably going to want to create. So we're going to go to New Rule, and I'm going to do another one on a port number. This time still using TCP, and this is going to be for 1434, so it's one port up. And this is going to be, we're going to allow the connection for all the profiles, and this is going to be for our direct administrative control. And this is something that we'll use as kind of a backup connection for troubleshooting. And then the last one that we're going to want to create is going to be for, do port, and it's going to be for UDP port 1434. Different protocol, but still one port up. We're going to allow the connection, and this is going to be for our SQL server browser. Okay, so that creates the rules that we need. We have configured the IP connectivity and we've tested it. So now we know our clients should be ready to connect to our SQL server to input and receive data.